Welcome back onto the next edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. Great to have you here, and another one of our Q&A sessions today, and we've got some fantastic questions. Today we're going to be checking if it is possible to run your easy runs too easy. We're going to talk about a sub-threshold training for over 50s runner, lifting super heavy and running. We're also going to be talking about intervals, or the rest intervals rather, in hill repeats. We've got a great question about those, and fueling for a half marathon. Lindsey Parry, nice to have you with us today.
Always good to be here, Brad. Love answering these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to submit a question, you can do so pretty easily. All you need to do is click on the link that's in the description of this video. We do love video questions, and we filter those to the top. So if you want to guarantee that you get your question answered on this podcast, that's what you need to do. You can also send it as a voice note, or if you would like to type it out, you're more than welcome to do that too. But I can tell you that Peter, who's out in Germany, sent us a video question. He snuck in two, Lindsey. Two for the price of one here for Peter, but great questions nonetheless. And this is what Peter's got to say.
Just waiting to go for a run in my car here in Germany. I'm from the UK originally, just turned 50, and found your podcast recently. Been really enjoying the episodes. Been running about 20 years, triathlon at first, just running since I had my kids, I suppose 2016. And I've been doing well. I seem to have a bit of a talent for it. Training for a local race here in Leipzig and Frankfurt Marathon also this year, hoping to go 2:35, 2:38, have a PB of 2:42 from 3 or 4 years ago. Things seem to be coming together. So I have a question about easy runs. Is it possible to go too easy? I usually do my easy runs between 450 to 520 per kilometer. And that's from a heart rate of 110 to 120, usually in that kind of range. I have a friend I run with who's a bit slower, and sometimes I'm running along and I feel this might be a little too easy. So it's a two-part question. That's the first part. And another question, I've been reading a lot about sub-threshold training recently. I'm currently following a marathon plan until April, but I'm looking to maybe try that after April. And the basic concept is 3 sub-threshold runs of around 30 minutes of work each per week. Everything else easy, including a long run. I've seen a lot of people have some really good results with that. So could that be a good way to train? It's not quite, it's going against the grain of what a lot of other coaches say. So yeah, sub-threshold runs, and is it possible to go too easy on your easy runs? Thanks.
Yeah, Lindsey, let me just say, Peter is a racing snake. 2:35 marathon, that is super fast.
Yeah, look, it's exceptional. In his 50s, that's very, very fast. Certainly might not quite be the 1%ers that we, in terms of going to the Olympics, but really not far off that. And so my answer to Peter is actually going to be quite different to what I would generally answer. So I think the most important thing here is, of course, there is always a window on the slow side that is too slow. But for most human beings, we're never going to get near that, just by nature of how we operate, how we feel when we run, the habits that we've created over the years. But once we get into this, like tiny margins, right at the top edge of your sport, there are levers that we have to consider pulling to see how can we further improve without taking like really unnecessary risks. And this would be one of those areas, is like, okay, what's the ideal pace? And that is what I would work out based on that particular time. And I'm going to do the calculation in a second, but 520 feels like we're getting close to that kind of what is too slow. So I would feel like 520 is probably okay on some of those recovery runs that you've got to do, particularly when your legs are a bit achy and tired. But I'd say on the long runs, that's probably getting out to that outer edge of what I would consider to be maybe a little bit slow. So I am going to currently the PB. I know what he's training for, but currently the PB is a 2:42. So that is what I'm kind of going to work on, and then just that gives us a threshold of very approximate threshold in the sort of mid 320s. So that is kind of just what I'm going to use to give us a rough idea of what I would consider to be too easy in this scenario, but also just to stress again that for most people, even pretty fast runners, we would tend to be very far away from what's considered the minimum. So yeah, I mean, I'd say 520 is that kind of upper range. And I'd probably say that running in the region of the 430s to 445s are probably closer for the long runs, are probably closer for Peter to what is going to elicit the ideal physiological response, but also to keep the load and the stress on the actual muscles at the right place for him. Obviously, now being quite close to a race, he said April. So actually, there's a little bit of time still. But being very used to 450 to 520, of course, now because you've been told maybe 430 to 445 is more appropriate, I wouldn't leap straight there because the change in load will be quite severe. But I would tend towards there. So 445 to 450 is quite close. So maybe I'd look at 435 to 445 as a nice countermeasure. The 520s, I'd say more for my kind of recovery runs and those kind of things. And I think it's right on the upper limit of what I would say for you is probably too slow. In terms of the sub-threshold type of training.
Lindsey, before you get into the sub-threshold, let me just ask you a question. And this is for the general population, maybe not necessarily to Peter. Like, what's worse, running too easy or running your easy runs too hard? Like, I mean, you say it's difficult for the general population. Like, you're doing more. There's more danger in running them too hard than too easy. Yeah, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely, way more. Way more danger. And look, even for Peter, that point is true. I mean, I can tell you that a 440 marathoner, in theory, is still doing aerobic work at like 405 minutes per K. So at 405 minutes per K, Peter's still going to be getting the right kind of physiological adaptation that he needs for running these fast marathons. But 3 or 4 weeks of doing all his easy runs at just over 4 minutes per kilometer, that's going to start doing some serious damage. And so he's better off doing 520 per K than he is doing 355 per K. And that's exactly why I say this is generally not an issue in the general population, because in the general population, they will be closer to that 405 line that is like very risky to train at. They wouldn't be at the 520 side. So no, you definitely want to be on the too slow side rather than the too fast side. There's no question. Yeah.
And before you answer the sub-threshold training, what is sub-threshold training for those of us who don't know what it is? Let me put my hand up. I'm one of them.
So basically what that is to do training runs that are not quite at threshold, but that are right at the top end of your zone 2 training. Okay. So, and in Peter's case, that's going to be right around this, like, okay, so 325-ish, let's call it that is. So he's talking about doing half an hour at, like, let's call it 330. Or just slower than 330 per kilometer for half an hour each week. So, no,
but it was three of those sessions a week. It wasn't just one.
Correct. No, 3 of those sessions a week, which I'm going to still unpack. But I just want to get a calculator out here quickly. And let's say that Peter actually gets to his marathon time that he's targeting of 4:35. So that's 340 per kilometer. So again, when you look at it like that and you go, okay, well, 330 It's not much faster than my marathon pace. It's going to prepare my body really well for doing for doing 2.5 hours worth of marathon training. And so that's probably why there has been some reasonable success with this type of training, because it probably does prepare you in some aspects for running a really good marathon. But I would question if it would prepare you for your best possible marathon. And I think one of the reasons why it may work is because anything that leads you to buy in wholeheartedly to doing the bulk of your training at a proper aerobic level, and then part of your training quite a lot harder, any training that causes those two things to happen is going to help you improve. And so it may well be that there are athletes that buy into this, and therefore 80% of their training is done exactly where it's supposed to be. And okay, if you're doing 3, probably more like 70% versus 30%, but that's still not a terrible ratio. But I would argue to say that someone with Peter's ability is far better off following a very specific marathon plan. And this is why I said, look, now I'm talking to someone who's on a totally different level to the general runner over 50 that we're dealing with. Even the quite serious 50-year-old runner is just not, this is like top of the pops, okay? And people who are training in that area tend to be able to handle training loads a bit different. They tend to recover from their sessions faster. And for obvious reasons, they tend to need a little bit more and very different type of training. So I would say that Peter would definitely benefit from this kind of training as part of the overall picture, not 3 times a week. In fact, every 2 to 3 weeks, I would say some form of steady state, fast finish, marathon pace, long run, every 2 to 3 weeks through a 12 to 15 week training cycle will help to prepare you much better for a marathon. And one of the things that you can do when you do these type of sessions in marathon training is also help you to up your nutrition practice for race day, because one of the big limiting factors when we are pushing this hard for this long is, can we provide the body with the nutrition that it needs? And the only way we can provide it is if we practice it. You can't rock up on marathon day trying to run 2:35 and you have been practicing your nutrition at 4:45 per K, and now suddenly you want to run 3:40 per K and get all those gels in and the sheer volume of gels in. And there's enough research now to show that, maybe we need as a basic amount 1 gram per kg of body mass, but we've now seen that if you can provide your body with more than that, 70 grams, 80 grams of carbohydrates per hour, that there are some big performance benefits that you can get out of that on race day. And that one of the limiting factors on race day when we're pushing this hard is our ability to get enough carbohydrates in. So those 30 to 60 minute sessions really help you dial in on nutrition and dial in on race plan and dial in on race intensity. But they shouldn't be every week, and they certainly shouldn't be 3 times a week.
Awesome stuff, James. Peter, thank you so much. He said James. The next question is from James. Well, Peter, that's amazing. Please do stay in touch. We'd love to know how you go at the Leipzig Marathon. It's Frankfurt Marathon that you're running.
Frankfurt,
Fingers crossed.
Nice and flat. Good race.
We're sending tons of positive vibes for that 2:35 onslaught. Man, that is super fast. I'd be chuffed to that for the first half of a marathon. Lindsay, that's sort of where I'm at the moment. Okay, next question from James Mitchell. He's in my neck of the woods in Cape Town in South Africa. James says, I've been following the training program for a few weeks now, focusing on low heart rate training. My overall training load's been lower than usual, and I'm generally feeling well rested, I'm eating well, and I'm in good shape. However, the past month or so, I've noticed my heart rate variability drop significantly twice. The only other time this has happened was after a particularly tough race where I overdid it. I'm trying to figure out what might be the cause of this. Could it be linked to low intensity training focus? Interestingly, both times my heart rate variability rebounded after doing overgear sessions, and it was the first real aerobic effort I'd done for a while. Does this suggest I need to incorporate more intensity, or is this just a natural adjustment to the training? Would love to hear your thoughts. If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
My bias is going to lean towards I don't want to call it a natural response to the training, because in theory, your HRV should be going up when you are adjusting, particularly to this kind of approach of having slightly lower. And for sure, even let's take a step back and go, this is not the kind of training that James responds the best to. Even in that scenario where we are detraining slightly, our HRV should be looking good. It shouldn't be reflecting that we are under stress. So there are a couple of things that are potentially happening at the same time. One of them could be that the change in training volume and load perhaps is impacting on the quality of sleep. Okay, so that is one little thing that's very hard to determine, but perhaps in the short term in particular, this taking a little bit of a step back in the training approach has compromised sleep slightly, and that's maybe had a impact on that HRV. So that's definitely one of the scenarios. And then there may or may not be, and only James can answer this question, there may or may not be some other short-term stresses that have crept into James's life around relationships, work, you know, getting a kid into high school, which I can now speak to with great experience. But these are all short-term stresses that a sick loved one or friend, these are the kinds of things that can also have an impact on those short-term HRVs. But if it is a pure training impact, I would say that the most likely culprit is maybe a shift in sleep patterns from stepping back a little bit. And I would keep monitoring it. And, you know, if it literally just happens again, and there is no other external anything we can look at other than the fact that we've had this change in training, it is possible. And I'm only saying it's possible because I've seen some incredible things in my 30 years of being at this, that people respond very individually to certain things. I'd be surprised if we are having worse recovery from having lower intensity training, but I've seen stranger things in terms of individual responses to certain types of training. So keep a record, keep an accurate record around things that are just happening generally around you, food types that you are taking in and around those incidents, so that we can really try and narrow down exactly what's causing that impact. And then if we do get to a point where we're fairly confident that it actually is linked to either the training load coming down too low and therefore impacting your ability to sleep, or the actual nature of the training, and then we may need to make a few tweaks there.
Thank you very much for that question, James. Much appreciated. Don't forget, if you have a question you'd like answered as well, all you need to do is click on the link that's in the description of this podcast or on YouTube as well. That's exactly what Ryan in Denver, Colorado did. Lindsey, I'm going to paraphrase this one. It's fairly long, but the gist of it is around strength training. And Ryan has got some big strength training goals. Some of them that he wants to hit is 80 kilogram bench press, 120 kilogram squats, and 140 kilogram deadlifts. But he's also running. He trains he's tracking his progress towards these benchmarks, mixing up the exercises, reps, weights, etc., to keep things balanced. Typically, he does a full body heavy lifting workout 3 times a week. He's looking to incorporate some running specific strength training into his routine. He's looked at some of the stuff that we do, and he's finding that the intermediate to advanced feels like he's not even warming up. What advice can you give Ryan here? Does he need to add any more? Is he doing enough? Is there other things he can do? And when should he do it? Should he do the running specific stuff on his heavy lifting days, or should he do them on normal running days?
So I think the most important thing for me to put in here is that in terms of his absolute strength needs, with the squats and the deadlifts in particular, he's taking care of a lot of the good aspects of the strength loss that we experience as we get older. In terms of there's nothing wrong with the exercises themselves. The problem is that the resistance. Okay, so for the running specific exercises, those are great exercises, but James just has to explore ways of increasing the resistance to a point that he feels like they are working him quite hard. In terms of when to do those, I would incorporate them as part of his leg routine. Okay, so, and he can even do the running specific exercises. He can do some of them, especially with the small intrinsic things around the hip. You can do some of them as a warm-up to doing the bigger prime mover lifts. And then you can do some of them after the prime mover lifts, because they are smaller muscles. They are designed to do slightly different work. He can exercise those with lower resistances and isolate them and work on them. But I would keep leg days as leg days, upper body days as upper body days, and I would keep the leg days and the running specific strength away from the running days. So do those on non-running days. Try not to lift too heavy the day before your higher intensity running days. But yeah, that's kind of the pattern that I would go with, and I'd say that the absolute strength gains are going to be brilliant. They are going to help his running, and then the running specific exercises will just help creating the right kind of stability and mobility that he needs to stay healthy when he's running.
Cool stuff. Thank you very much for that question, Ryan. Much appreciated. Next question comes in from Michael Hayes.
Sorry, and Ryan, I think I was calling you James there because it was still stuck in my head from the previous question. So apologies, Ryan.
All right. The next question is from Michael Hayes. Write this one down, Lindsey. Michael from Sydney, Australia. Michael saying, hi there. Is it okay to extend the rest periods of my 2-minute hill repeats beyond 2.5 minutes? The issue I'm running into is that the only hill in my area that meets the 3.5 to 5% gradient isn't long enough. When I run uphill for 2 minutes, jogging back down for 2.5 doesn't get me to the bottom. So I end up running out of hill in the session as the session progresses. And I have exactly the same problem, Michael. So I know the struggle that you're dealing with. He says, I'm sticking to the prescribed paces pretty accurately, but I'm having to pause my watch to get further back down the hill before starting the next repeat. Would you recommend adjusting the rest periods, or is there a better way to approach this?
Yeah, so you absolutely can do it. And so with hill training, the way that I would approach it is actually to set the workout to end the interval with, or end the current interval, start the next interval with the lapping of your watch, rather than having that just automatically happen. Because the hills workout in itself is probably the most difficult one for me to calculate exactly what the ratio should be in terms of how fast to go up, and how long it should take you to come down. And it's because we always start at a very fixed spot that we need to get back to. So on a track, for example, if I gave 2 minutes and 2.5 minutes, you could do 2 minutes and then you could kind of jog wherever you liked and then just find your way back at the start for 2.5 minutes. So part of the difficulty is you got to get back to the exact spot, but now you find yourself quite a long way from that spot. So how do you get back there? And there's no issue having those rest intervals longer. I think that's the very short version there. Hill work is working on a very specific type of adaptation around, in particular, prepping your muscles to do speed work. And so the rest work ratio isn't critical in terms of what we're trying to achieve. What I really want is people to just be fully recovered before they do the next one. So if it's taking you 3 minutes, that's okay.
I don't know if I've told you this, Lindsey, but I found it quite funny, and I think you would too. So I finally found a proper hill in the area that I live that I can do my hill repeats with, and I find it quite ironic that it is the street's name is Ducket, because we know what that rhymes with. So yeah, we do say that to ourselves a few times in every single session. Next question from Chris Morgan in Toronto in Canada. Chris saying, what's the recommended fueling strategy for a half marathon? My goal is to go sub 2. I currently use Cliff Blocks. Each one has 8 grams of carbs. My usual approach is to eat 2 of those around 45-minute mark, and then every 20 to 30 minutes after that, always with water in between. I always take sports drink that's available on the course as well. Does this sound like a good plan? What would you suggest? Any adjustments to optimize my energy levels and performance? Obviously, everybody uses different products, but the sort of big thing, I don't know if you want to give rule of thumb with regards to sort of grams of carbs and the best way to go about it.
So it's a fabulous question. I think you said it was from Chris. It's a fabulous question, and I am going to go back to the very first answer I gave in this particular pod, and that was Peter. This is a particularly good question because nobody thinks about nutrition in a half marathon, because typically, as we go through our running careers, a lot of people are like, okay, well, we've got roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours of glycogen stores in our muscles. So for the most part, a lot of people just think, oh, well, for a half marathon, I've got enough store. So if I just take in a little bit, I'll be absolutely fine, combined with a decent pre-race meal. And do I really need the energy? And to perform at your best, the answer to that question is yes, because one of our limiting factors is always going to be how much fuel can we provide to the body to burn. And the more fuel we can provide, the more likely we're going to have a better outcome. So I love the fact that this question is relation to a half marathon, because most people don't even think about nutrition when it comes to a half marathon. And, once you get into your 50s, running under 2 hours for a half marathon is still good. I mean, there's literally nothing wrong with running under 2 hours. So as soon as we get to 2 hours, 2 hours 15, I know thousands of over 50s that are running 2:15 to 2:45 half marathons. And so absolutely becomes important to be supplementing. So, okay, if we want to go and now have a look at, okay, well, what's the ideal? Again, the ideal is teaching yourself to take in 1 gram per kg of body weight. My gut tells me here that Chris's plan is adequate. So nothing wrong there with what Chris is doing, but I think he'd easily double that number, and then he'll be getting in a good bit of energy and have a low probability of energy being one of the reasons why it doesn't get to his target on race day.
Awesome stuff. Chris, thank you so much for that question. Don't forget, if you have a question that you would like answered, all you need to do is click on the link that's in the description of this podcast. You can get your question to the top of the pile by submitting a video one. It's pretty easy to do. You can also send us a voice note, or you can type your question out as well, just as Chris did. Lindsey, as always, great to catch up. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. And we look forward to catching up again soon. Don't forget, we do really appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast. And if you get any value out of it, we'd love it. We'd appreciate it if you'd left us a review or a rating on whatever podcast platform you listen to. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button as well so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, from the two of us, it's cheers.